I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As you just painfully saw, the meeting is being recorded, audio and visual. Since our last meeting on the 8th, the commissioners have been together in 2 executive session meetings and exchanged a few emails. One was this morning, the 22nd, and one was the 14th. The purpose was to negotiate with the union, which is exempt under Sunshine Law. I'm not aware of any other meetings to disclose, are either of you? Or any significant emails? Okay. Public hearing. It's been advertised that we were going to have a public hearing this morning on the 2017 CDBG funds. At this point, I'll turn it over to our Planning and Zoning Director, Dan Glotz, to present.
Okay, I'm here on behalf of Lloyd Dunlap, our grants administrator. The purpose of today's public meeting is to receive public comment on the proposed 2017 Community Development Block Grant application. Our allocation this year is $225,000. We have solicited projects earlier in the year, and following an analysis and review of potential candidates, it was determined that a project in Bear Lake Borough does indeed qualify for this assistance. So the funding would be used, well, the first thing we'll do is issue an RFP for engineering services, and then once the design is done, an RFP for construction services. But the engineer would be responsible for designing the system itself, and then from there it would be contracted out for construction. The project amounts to about 1,400 linear feet of stormwater improvements along Center Street in Bear Lake Borough. It's a north-south street, and this project would begin at Greeley Street, which is through the center of town, and progress south from Greeley Street, approximately 1,400 feet. Anybody has any questions about the project? I'm happy to answer those.
Board have any questions?
We are required by law to hold a public hearing each time we identify projects and use of that funding.
Questions?
Was the project submitted by the township supervisors?
It would be Borough Council in this case, Bear Lake Borough.
Anything else?
That's it.
Very good. And we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Has everyone had a moment to look at the agenda? As a point, we neglected, although we talked about it in work session, we neglected to put on the printed copy for this morning resolution number 3093, which is for the redevelopment task force. Again, we discussed it in the work session. We agreed we were going to put it on the agenda, and in fact, appointing people to said task force is on the agenda. So I guess we need to create the task force before we put people on it. So that'll go just before appointments to the redevelopment task force. Anything else on the agenda? Good. Okay. Does anyone have a chance to review the minutes? Good. Fiscal report.
In the general fund this week, we have $2,897,847.37. In the Erie Bank General Fund account, $746,076.97, for a total of $3,643,924.34. Payments coming out of the general fund this week would be payroll and payroll and taxes for $273,110.99. Payments for election workers of $18,947, and a health care bill of $58,624.17. leaving a projected balance in the general fund of $2,547,165.21. Right on line pretty much with last year at this time.
Good. And all our tax anticipation notes paid off. Our internal debt to Erie Bank has been paid off.
I moved that. The letters are downstairs now to transfer the money. I'm not sure when the treasurer's going to get it in, if he'll be able to get it today or if it'll end up going on
It's in motion.
Monday.
Okay. Very good. Any questions from the board? Very good. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda minutes from the November 8th meeting and the fiscal report.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor of approving the agenda, the minutes from November 8th and the fiscal report, please state aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Moving on to new business. We had Attorney Shreve give who's the county solicitor, overhaul our right to know policy. There were several areas in which it was deficient compared to case law and the state law. And so he worked several weeks ago to update it and presented at a work session probably 3 weeks ago, I think. Nothing has changed in this version from the version that he presented. As a reminder, he will want to create at some point an addendum for the social media right to know policy, which I believe we have already passed, correct? And is being implemented.
Yes.
And I did speak with him before the meeting for your concern about specifying the policy as it pertains to the retrieval software. And he said that that would also be an appropriate thing to put in as an addendum.
Okay. I'd like it to read something in the effect of an audit trail of information pulled from digital sources. Doesn't need to be specific to Laserfish or
Right, did you
or
get
any
that?
software program.
Could you repeat the language?
Sure. A reference made within the right to know policy in regard to the use of an audit trail of information pulled from digital sources and the redaction tool method available with those systems.
I'm agreeable to that.
I can give that to you later.
Okay. Then with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the right to know policy as it was presented by Attorney Shreve with the, yes.
I do have one more comment. Also, the IT department, specifically Bill Gallagher, did mention that he didn't see anywhere in the policy that there's a reference to a legal hold. And he states that having occasions in the past where they've had requests for information but have had requests for legal hold on certain types of documents. In the cases that I'm specifically recalling, they were emails that we were flagging. So we might want to put that in there just for our own protection.
Is that something you wanted to add now?
It might be best if we did do that, I think.
Would you be interested in tabling this then until we can insert that, or do you want to insert it as a whole?
I would move to table this, yes, to make the corrections.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Very well. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right to know policy is tabled until a majority of the body decides to bring it back up. Resolution 3092, authorization for the application of the 2017 CDBG. This ties in nicely with what we just heard in terms of public hearing. Dan, do you want to explain it?
Sure. The program guidelines for the Community Development Block Grant Program require that the county commissioners authorize a resolution to submit the application to the State Department of Community and Economic Development for each program year. And this is simply a resolution authorizing us to move forward with the submittal of that application. Again, the amount is $225,057 as our allocation for the 2017 program year. This would authorize us to go ahead and submit the application to DCED.
Very well. Did I hear that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Hear a motion and a second to approve Resolution 3092. Any public comment? All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the 504, Section 504 officer. Lori Dunlap is our current officer, and I assume you're here to request that she be reappointed.
Yes, each year, a Section 504 officer in process for grievances has to be addressed by the county commissioners. Lori is currently serving in that position. We are requesting that she be recertified again for another year, and anyone who wishes to file a complaint or grievance would contact her directly, or the Department of Housing and Urban Development, either at the Philadelphia office or the Pittsburgh office. There are some updates that we have completed as part of this that address ADA compliance, and those include the threshold at the handicap access on Fifth Street. Entrance was lowered to less than a quarter of an inch to allow for easy access by wheelchairs through that door. Tax claim office had a counter installed that allows for easy access for folks by wheelchair or someone who needs to sit down while doing business in that department. The door of the Commissioner's conference room was adjusted to open more easily. Doorbell was installed at the Domestic Relations Office at 333 Hickory Street Annex. For someone who may need assistance getting through the door in a wheelchair, it's difficult to open. If you're wheelchair bound, that resolves that. A new door that's easier to open was installed at the District Magistrate Office at the annex as well. 911 center, there were yellow threads placed on the building's entrance and that exterior staircase to increase visibility there. Also cracks repaired in the wheelchair ramp at that facility. And then yellow stair threads have been purchased and are ready for installation here at the courthouse. For the stair treads, there will be one placed at the bottom of the steps and another at the top of the steps for visibility purposes.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Dan? I'd entertain a motion to appoint Lori Dunlap again as the Section 504 officer.
I'm going to appoint Lori.
I will second that.
Any public comment? You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is an agreement with excuse me, National Curriculum and Training Institute. This is a sub-licensed sales agreement for some 40-some curriculums that adult probation uses. Has anyone had a chance to review the agreement? I think this is a standard agreement that we've passed I don't know how many times before. Any questions about it? I'd entertain a motion to approve it.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any public comment? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the sublicense and sales agreement with National Curriculum and Training Institute effective May 1st, 2017, backdating it, please state aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next is the guest terms of use for Warren County and our wireless internet policy. Currently, we do not allow personal devices or people who are not employees on our wireless internet, but we are making moves towards being able to do that. And in order to preempt that, we had the solicitor draft up, based on common guidelines, guest terms of use for our wireless internet. So hopefully in the future, we will be able to have a separate router if there are any security concerns that would allow, for instance, lawyers, people who are here to present, et cetera, and perhaps personal devices, but that'll go in the personnel handbook, to join onto the network and gain access to the internet, but not through the county servers. Well, I shouldn't say through the county servers, but not through the sensitive parts. So I have had a chance to review this, and the solicitor brought it up to our work session, I think it was last week. Are there any questions about it?
I do have a few suggestions. Again, I contacted IT and asked that they review this, and was told that this there will be costs associated with this.
Right.
I guess I would be interested in knowing what those costs were.
To be clear, there's no cost in passing the agreement, of course.
Correct.
But
But before we pass the agreement, I'd really like to know what we're getting into as far as costs.
yeah, the ballpark that I believe he told me was $2 to $3 grand. And And that would be in order to run some new Cat 5, 6, 7 cable and install new routers. And I believe put it through a firewall, but not, don't quote me on that, but not through the county's server.
Okay, and then he did say something in regard to monitoring. He said this also will require a cost. Monitoring is something that either occurs real time or after the fact.
Right.
Unfortunately, someone could be sitting outside the courthouse using our open Wi-Fi.
Right. And one of the common ways to get around that would be to turn off the Wi-Fi on during non-business hours. Pretty simple thing to do.
Right.
Just to address Commissioner Morrison's concerns, I think it might be worth it to have just a draft of what the coverage is going to be for this and what the cost related to that is. Just because my understanding of this, one of the reasons that this is kind of a priority to some extent is for the courts and for people related to the courts that are constantly utilizing constantly trying to figure out how to use or access the internet. For many of them, they're using personal devices which have limited connectivity within the building, and even if you implemented, even if you hypothetically set up a network with a Wi-Fi, the brick walls in this building, really prevent the Wi-Fi from getting anywhere. It's one of the reasons why we have such a hard time putting Wi-Fi in just for our employees internally. So this is another thing that might be worth it to I would offer to table it until the next commissioners meeting, just to have the ability to maybe work with IT just to get a rough sketch of what, because my understanding of this would be that it's not some expansive policy that's being put in place. It's just creating the opportunity for us to have a public or a semi-public Wi-Fi within the building, which could be one port that's around the court area to, starting out to allow the lawyers and the people involved in the court system to access the internet.
Even the few people that we allow occasionally onto the network currently would be covered under this, which is why I think it's relevant and a reason that we should vote on it. Whether or not we go forward in the future with putting a router in here, the main courtroom, the jury room, and the commissioner's conference room is kind of irrelevant. I still think we want to be covered over, with this.
There were
I
a
agree
few
to that as
other concerns that the IT department had that I feel would be of our best interest to incorporate into the policy before we adopt it. I thought those
What are those?
corrections were being made. Well, the monitoring, you said to shut it off at night or, when we're not here. However, that really doesn't address the fact that during the day, people could be outside using our open Wi-Fi for sites that we can't really monitor.
Just totally run through a firewall.
The policy should state open Wi-Fi may have restrictions and limitations. For instance, the county should make specific categories of use to be deemed inappropriate and locked down, such as sites offshore, porn, hacking, etc., etc. And then creating the hotspot login will also need definition and creation, as it simply does not just appear. This needs to be engineered and installed as well. And so I think that there's a few concerns that need to be addressed.
So none of those are relevant to the actual guest terms of use.
Right?
So
But
if the
maybe
board
we should-
wants to table it, it certainly doesn't matter to me, but just to be clear, they're not relevant to this discussion.
That's another good point I would say too, is that, currently we have people that we do allow on our network. It's people that come in to do presentations, other things. For those people that are currently using it now anyway, having a policy that they sign when they come in would be useful, just to have it as a waiver of liability on our part and outlining to them what their responsibilities are utilizing the network. It doesn't necessarily create the things that Bill is reasonably concerned about.
Well, it actually does under section 3. think that we need to read it all, but spam, shame letters, anything that has to do with harassment, sex, forgery, et
Well,
cetera, et cetera.
not, that stuff's in there. I'm just saying,
Right.
like, it doesn't create a network. Like, the
Oh, yeah,
policy
right.
doesn't create
Exactly.
the structure, the technical structure that would require IT to do a bunch of work. That we can, I think, we could also have it say that we could parse that out with Bill once policy was in place.
And that, that would be figured out when we would commission IT to actually come up with a quote, an official quote, not just a verbal, on the actual cost of implementing. But again, I don't see any harm in passing the guest terms of use policy now. But I would entertain, unless the board has any more comments at this time, a motion to either table or accept.
I'll move to approve the policy as long as we follow through with some of these issues I've stated.
I would second passing the
Guest use as presented, the caveat that you want to make sure that your concerns are dealt with. Any public discussion?
I have a question. It does say by clicking your acceptance, you're accepting this agreement. Do we actually have the ability to have them do that yet? Click acceptance.
No, they would need to sign this physically
Okay.
currently. But then in the future, just like whenever you go to a hotel or whatever, this is the thing that pops up on the screen. You have to click I accept.
Totally understand that. I just,
And
I
they'll be
didn't know
given
there
a
was
code
something
when they
about.
sign that, correct?
I believe that was what this said, yes.
I totally understood that. I just didn't know if we actually, you're passing a policy that's stated in it by clicking acceptance, but we don't have that.
What page is that on?
That's all.
By signing the waiver, you're given a code.
Right.
And then they get a code, and then they can accept.
Exactly.
I guess I do have a question.
Sure.
If you have the Wi-Fi inside the courthouse, does the Wi-Fi become under the condition of right to know?
No. It has to do with whether it's government business or not. So, yeah, I mean, if we're doing government business on it, then that is right to knowable. But the use of a private citizen that's simply on it would have no bearing on, would not be right to knowable. Anything else? The motion again is to approve the guest terms of use. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. I assume I can take from this board that we should go ahead and solicit a quote from the IT department and figure out the actual cost then of moving to the next phase. Next will be Resolution 3093, which I will turn over to Commissioner Eggleston to present.
So this concept is similar to the marketing task force that was generated earlier this year and is currently functioning. The marketing task force was something that was done in order to gather information and put together recommendations for the commissioners related to marketing promotion in the county. That has gone very well, from my opinion, and I'm looking forward to wrapping up the group in January, February timeframe. This resolution would generate a new task force that is related to redevelopment, and basically the impetus for this is over the past year, having got involved in the Blight Committee, attending redevelopment authority meetings, and then talking with and then the various things that have gone on in tax claim, going to a number of different housing meetings and a number of other things, it's become apparent that that all of the various processes that the county engages in currently as it relates to redevelopment should be reviewed and studied, and then recommendations be brought to the Commissioner's office for their review. This group, similar to the marketing task force, has no official capacity or authority to enact anything. They simply gather in order to put information together, come up with ideas, and then make recommendations to the Commissioner's office. So the redevelopment task force has a handful of priorities. The first is dealing with the blight process and the blight and redevelopment process that the county undertakes currently, which basically involves the blight committee, which basically identifies properties from municipalities, or municipalities identify properties, present them to the blight committee. They make a determination whether it fits under the statutes of blight, and then it moves on to the planning commission, which then takes a look at it. Then it moves on to the redevelopment authority. Then it moves on to where does it go after that, Dan? It's redevelop. It gets resolved. So. Through talking with people, members of those groups, it's become apparent that since the process was generated in 2008, it hasn't been heavily reviewed in that time. And there were a lot of recommendations just from the people on those committees as far as things that could be done differently in order to make the process more efficient, more effective, and more proactive. The second item is tax claim, which is something that we've been looking at more and more over the past year and a half. And the goal there is to review the tax claim process as it relates to the county and kind of identify ways that we can be more proactive with tax claim, more effective with tax claim in order to alleviate, some of the properties that we have that repeatedly end up in tax claim, deal with some of the properties that have potential for redevelopment that maybe there are some opportunities through the Tax Claim Bureau to utilize. So the tax claim is the second one. Third one is business development. This is related to properties that within the county that are in flux or have the potential to be redeveloped, or a variety of things related to that. Identifying what our current processes are, if there's any other processes that we could engage in, try to prevent properties from slipping through the cracks and maybe becoming blighted or becoming a nuisance property or becoming ending up a tax claim or something else. So if there are any ways to catch or administer or affect change within commercial properties in order to produce a better result for the county, that'll be part of the discussion as well. And the fourth item is housing, public housing and housing in general. There have been a lot of issues, especially with changes at the state and federal level with housing locally. And so part of this group is going to be to take a look at the housing situation in the county, determine the adequacy of it. Is there anything that the county can do differently? Are there any programs that are being enacted in other counties that are being successful? All those types of things would be discussed as a part of the overall group. The group would start in January. It would end in May, I believe, or April. It's set to run for about 4 months. This one, I'm proposing it to be a shorter window, simply because I think that most of the information that's related to it is either of a legal nature or people already have made recommendations or have access to it. So I don't think it'll be too hard to put a lot of the recommendations together in that time. It's going to be made up of a minimum of 9 members. Today I've proposed 1, 2, 3, 4, I can't remember the number, for a total of 8. Actually there's a 9th that I haven't gotten a concrete confirmation on yet. So obviously there's 8, there's a minimum of 9, I'm expecting there to be 11. So there'll be another another 3 spots to fill in order to I think make it a complete effort. Just to go down the list of the people involved: Dan Glotz, the Planning and Zoning Director, which I think is for obvious reasons. Jim Decker of the WCCBI, and his involvement will be mostly related to business properties. Paul Pascuzzi, who is the chairman of the Blight Committee. Andrea Stapford, who is a solicitor for the city and also involved in the Redevelopment Authority. Phil Gilbert, who is a city councilman and the tax claim director. Myself, commissioner. John Shreve, who is the solicitor of the county. Reverend Matthew Scott, which is a member of the board of the EOC and involved in housing issues around the county. I'm expecting to have another person from the RDA involved in this, and then there'll be probably 2 more people, one potentially from the Realtors, Board of Realtors, and then probably another one that's related to housing issues. Does anybody have any questions?
No, I would entertain a motion just to take the resolution and your board appointments at the same time.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 3093, authorizing the redevelopment task force and approving the appointment of the 8 people that I have just mentioned, with more appointments to come.
Motion, I hear a second.
I'll second that, but I do have a few concerns I'd like to address.
Okay, motion is made and seconded. Please go ahead with your discussion.
Well, a few of my concerns, I sent Commissioner Eggleston an email and asked him what his reasons were for developing this task force, and I didn't get a real definitive answer in regard to specifics. We already have a blighted property committee that addresses these concerns, and you stated, Commissioner Eggleston, that some of these members stated that there could be maybe a better process, better efficiencies. And I guess my take on that would be that then they should suggest that to their committee and work through those. In regard to tax claim, addressing any of the property concerns and maybe addressing any of the concerns with maybe potentially avoiding people who go into default in paying their taxes. The chamber is already in charge of community property development, and private properties are just that. They're owned by private individuals, and they have a vested interest in their own properties. And there is a process in place with tax claim. If you go for 2 years and your taxes are left unpaid, then you run the risk of losing that property. I don't think that it's our place as a county commissioner to try to dictate to a private owner how to control their property. So again, I guess I just don't understand why the county should have a say in that. And then jumping to something else with tax claim, the state will prevent really any changes from being made in tax claim. They're governed by the state. And if we need to expect more efficiencies out of our tax claim department, then maybe we need to address that with our tax claim director. As far as properties, school district, for instance, those decisions with the schools left vacant are certainly up to that school board to address those concerns and whether or not they would release those properties. And I know that specifically there was a concern with Jefferson Street School. Once that was brought into private ownership, the owner of that building was attempting to convert that and ran into several issues with the city of Warren, and rightfully so. That's the proper procedure for the municipality to address those concerns, not the county. Public housing, we have a public housing authority in Warren County governed by the federal government, or HUD, and I believe our assessment director already works in coordination with them. Transitional housing and relocating inmates is up to the state and private agencies, along with nonprofits, such as Lakeshore and the Barber Center. And again, this is not a county function. Code enforcement, building enforcement, inspections by law, they have been remanded to the lowest form of government, meaning municipalities, putting them in control of blight in their own municipalities. Again, that's up to them, not a county function. Municipal studies are performed regularly by groups such as Alan Kugler, and I know that we get reports from him in regard to that. Again, I know that you want to name these people on this board for this task force. Are they all volunteer? Are they being paid? Will we ever see a point where we're expected to foot the bill for any of this task force, the county? I just feel that this may be a little bit of an overreach on behalf of the county.
Commissioner Eggleston, did you want to respond?
And so the Blight Committee, the Redevelopment Authority, and the Planning Commission are all independent bodies and have a difficult time communicating with each other to some extent because they're independent. It's very difficult for them to work collaboratively in order to change the overall process. The process was set out by the Commissioner's Office. It's authorized by an ordinance. And in order to change that process in any meaningful way, the commissioners would have to authorize that change. The goal in that particular area for the group is simply to bring everybody together to discuss these issues with people that have longstanding experience with those issues, to find if there are other ways to do what's being done already. The group has several members that are already have already identified changes that can be made. All of the changes that they would propose are done within a legal framework that's approved by the state. There are currently processes that we are not utilizing that the state has authorized with changes in law over the past 10 years since this was authorized. So that's part of like the recommendations that they would make with blight, redevelopment, and planning commission and other elements related to that. Again, those recommendations would come to us, and then we would be able to take a look at them, evaluate them, and if we felt that it was necessary to make the change, we could reauthorize the ordinance or make changes to the ordinance that's in place. As far as tax claim goes, through working with all these various bodies, I've had discussions with Andrew Stapleford, our attorney, other attorneys related to tax claim. Warren County traditionally has not taken a very proactive position on tax claim, and there are a number of different, and also the laws changed over the past 10 years. There are a lot of things that we could be doing with tax claim in order to make that body a little bit more efficient and maybe proactive. Again, that would require us to understand all of the issues related to it fully, have as much information as at our fingertips as possible, and then to evaluate that situation. So again, this group of people would be able to look at tax claim, evaluate it, make recommendations on, and it isn't just related to the operation of tax claim, it's also related to ordinances, policies, stuff related to the county that isn't necessarily just the administration of tax claim. All of these things would be evaluated. In some cases, there may not be any, they may come back and make recommendations and nobody here feels comfortable with whatever recommendations they make. That's fine. At least we took the lead on it, and so we're trying to drive it in a direction that's more proactive. As far as the housing situation, I agree that EOC exists and that they work with the HUD, and there's a lot that they do related to housing. The question is are there other things that can be done with housing? Are there things in the other agencies, other departments? There are tons of nonprofits that operate within this region. Are they all functioning at the level that they could be? Are there things that we could propose through the county, policies that we could change that would help advocate, coordinate, improve the housing situation within the county currently? Are there any cracks that we aren't seeing that people through research would be able to identify and we'd be able to fix that would be at no cost to the county? Business development, I agree, WCCBI generally handles a lot of the stuff related to business development. There are also other organizations that are involved in business development within the county. Again, this is to just look at the overall processes. An example of a process could be making sure that there's a uniform system where we identify properties that are development ready and we monitor them continuously. So if one of them falls into challenges or we feel like it's going to cause major problems within the county, we have identified them, and then we can coordinate with other agencies within the county in order to address the situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the county itself does something other than coordinate. We have access to a lot more information in some cases. Again, this is just a matter of leadership. The county will not foot the bill for this. Everyone that is working on this is doing so with the understanding that it's going to be a volunteer post. They're going to meet like I said, once a month there'll be a public meeting. We will put that schedule together and send it to the newspaper. Anybody will be able to attend the public meetings. There will be subcommittee meetings, and I'm expecting them to have them. And then also people are expected to bring information to the public meetings in order to share and then incorporate into the final report. This whole effort is just a matter of leadership by the county in order to try to bring people together in order to share information. That's basically the bottom line. There's nothing that this group can do that will incur any cost to the county. There's nothing this group can do to change the policies in and of itself. They're simply there to gather information and then make recommendations to the commissioner's office, and they're doing so entirely through a volunteer effort. That's all I have.
Rebuttal? Public comment?
I just want to speak from personal experience. I can see a disconnect between the different groups, between blight, RDA, tax claim. As city council member, I sat in on, with the RDA committee for the city. I sat in on a few blight meetings. I can see the disconnect where they don't understand what's going on. And a lot of times when I get the information wrong, I have to step up and say, hey, no, that's wrong. It's actually going to this type of sale or this. But I think it's a great idea that we can all sit down at one table and work together and figure out some new ideas. And also, there's other possibilities. I know with Habitat, I'm on the Habitat board, and there's a possibility that Habitat could work with these groups to improve those homes. So there's a lot of ideas out there that we know to use.
Thank you. Other public comment? Mr. Glotz?
I guess I would look at this as a way for each of the entities to better understand the roles and obligations of each other. The Blighted Property Process Redevelopment Authority is bound by law under the Urban Redevelopment Law as to the processes and procedures that have to be followed. But I don't think everyone completely understands all of that. There are other opportunities for the RDA to get involved in the community. There's proposed legislation as well as currently enacted legislation that has a potential effect or impact on some of the activities of redevelopment authorities and so forth. And it might be an opportunity then to take a look at those pieces of legislation and determine whether or not they could be of benefit to the county and the recommendation onto the commissioners if it was proven to be the case.
Very good.
Can I add one more item? I just wanted to quickly state that this is also something that once the report's completed, can be reviewed and used in conjunction with the long-term planning initiative that Mr. Glotz and the county will be involved in.
We do have a housing component of the comprehensive plan,
Yep.
so that information would be helpful.
I know PJ Manella from the PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, has been in touch with you. And the one concern, whenever anything impacts real estate, of course, we take an interest in that. When you're talking about public housing, are you talking about like the housing authority or just
Public housing generally.
In general,
So
okay.
it's anything like related to public housing. Yeah, and again, this is just, I brought this up not necessarily, obviously I'm interested in public housing, but I brought all of these points up because people involved in these various groups have brought concerns repeatedly to the commissioner's office. And so this is their opportunity officially to address those in a public sense, like through these meetings. So,
Yeah, because the one issue with public housing, if you're dealing with like the housing authority, then I think you'd want like the director of the housing authority on your committee, something like that. I've dealt with housing authorities in other counties and have done appraisal work for them and such. They're pretty regulated too on what they can do, and there's a liability component whenever you're dealing with housing individuals. So that's why I think it'd be good to have somebody
absolutely,
director
totally
of the
agree.
housing authority if you can get her. So I know you mentioned you had one from housing. I didn't know if it was.
Yeah, it's just one of the, Reverend Matthew Scott is a board member for EOC. I think that there are, out of the remaining people, one should probably be, one will definitely be somebody from like the Realtors Board or somebody related to the Realtors organization, just because obviously anything that's proposed here is going to affect them.
Right.
And then I wanted to have at least one other person that had a heavy housing background, you know, in order to kind of bring that to the table, because everybody else, I mean, and I'll just say very quickly that this was started with a focus on the blight process, and it just, as this was being worked on, it became apparent, like, well, why not put these other elements into it, because they're related to that and to tax claim. So that's if they seem like an afterthought, it's because to some degree, I don't want to say that they were an afterthought, but they've been added in the past month of working on this.
Very good. For the record, the last speaker was Ed Sakarik from Columbus Township. Since we're nearing the end time of our meeting, anything else I would ask would be kept to under 2 minutes. Any further public comment? And anything else from the board? For myself, I just want to say that I found similar models to work very well in terms of pulling together key stakeholders, performing gap analysis, and subsequent strategic planning. So I want to commend Commissioner Eggleston for spearheading this effort, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
I don't see any disadvantages, so there's no reason for me to vote against it. Anything else? The motion is to approve resolution number 3093, as well as appoint to the redevelopment task force Dan Glotz, Jim Decker, Paul Pascuzzi, Andrea Stapleford, Phil Gilbert, Jeff Eggleston, John Shreve, and Matthew Scott. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry, which was yours?
I heard.
Then it's unanimous. Last thing on our agenda is an agreement with Bollinger Technical Services. This is a maintenance agreement for 1 year, starting January 1st, 2018, going through the end of the year, for Bollinger to come in from Erie and maintain a vertical carousel that is in the Orthonetary's office at a total cost of $1,546. Any questions? I'd entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
You've heard any public comment? You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Any commissioner comments brought to the board at this time? Public comment? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.